while we're in the stand, let's take a moment to practice our observation skills a little bit. First, tell me what tree species you see. I'll walk around kind of slowly so that you can get close to some different trees to see their bark in a little bit more detail. It might be easiest if you face away from me so you can see what I'm pointing you at. So here, what do you think this one is that I'm touching? This is a Douglas fir. Oh, how about this one? This one's a little tricky. It's a smaller tree. What do you think this is? This is a western red cedar. It's starting to get that peely, flaky bark. Although this one actually looks like it's a snag. If you look up, this one's dead, but you can still see that bark. And on the forest floor, I found some cones. What kind of cone is this? Or what kind of tree is this cone from? This is a Douglas fir cone. It has these really characteristic three-cornered bracts. That's the dead giveaway for Douglas fir. Take a look at this. Here's an old snag. A snag is a standing dead tree. And we can see some signs of fire damage on this one. So this tells us a little bit about this stand's history. We don't necessarily know, just from looking at the snag, how long ago that fire happened, but the snag looks pretty old, and by knowing the fire history here, we know that I think the fires happened about 75 to 100 years ago. I'd have to double check. Take a look up. This is a really beautiful snag. Here, let me get on the lighter side of the tree so you can see a little better. Okay, take a look at this bark. Now take a look at this foliage. This should be pretty easy, hopefully. That's a western red cedar. Oh, how about this one? What's this bark? This is a western hemlock. Flat plates, they aren't so big, but they don't have that very stringy up and down pattern. How about this one that I'm touching? What's that? That's a Douglas fir. And this tree? It's a western red cedar. Okay, so we got a few examples of the three main species that we have in the coastal western hemlock forest. So hopefully those are starting to make a little bit more sense to you. Let's look at some of the plants. How about this bush in front of me? This has a bit of a giveaway because it still has some fruit on it. That's a red huckleberry, Vaccinium parvifolium. And that's what all of these shrubs right around here are. And I suspect, do you notice there's a lot of dead wood on the ground? And I think if you started digging, you'd find a lot of dead wood under the forest floor as well. So I think a lot of these red huckleberries are growing in dead wood. Notice there's not a lot of plant diversity right in this area. The soils are pretty poor since they're so shallow. So I think we're seeing a lot of plants that thrive in that. We're seeing a lot of mosses. Here we have two different kinds of moss. I'm not holding you responsible for learning your mosses for Forestry 350, but this is a good one. If anybody in Forestry 201 is watching this, this one's on your list. Hold on, let me get an individual here. Okay. This one is called steppe moss, Hylocomium splendens, because you have new growths of new kind of fronds that grow right out of the previous fronds in kind of a stair-step pattern. Let me see if I can find a better one. Here we go. You see how there's one growing and then another one grows out from it. Hylocomium splendens, steppe moss or stair step moss. And this one down here is called, I believe, wavy-leaved cotton moss. That one doesn't quite sound right, so I have to double check that one. Or flat moss. Flat moss is also it. So you can see why it's called flat moss, because each of these tufts is very flattened. I don't know if you can hear it on the mic, but I hear a Pacific tree frog calling in the distance. Let's see what else we see. I'm seeing a lot of red huckleberry, a lot of flat moss. Here's another moss. I think these are kind of the three main moss species we'll see around here. This one is called Oregon beaked moss. It looks superficially a little bit similar to the steppe moss, but it doesn't have that stair-step pattern. So in the CWH zone, I think those are probably the three mosses you'll come across the most. Here we go, here's another plant. Okay. This one's a little bit tricky. This is a fern, and you might think it's a spiny wood fern, and that wouldn't be a bad guess, but it's not. So this one has kind of three main blades, and do you notice how these two blades at the bottom are very triangular? They make a perfect triangle. This leaflet and this leaflet are the same length. On a spiny wood fern, this one would be very long and this one would be short. This one would be very long and this one would be short. When they are a pretty straight triangle like that, that tells you this is a bracken or bracken fern. This is one I don't care to see so much, but a good one to know. This is English holly. So this is a plant that is not native to this area. It is invasive to this area. If I gave you a plant ID quiz up here, you'd have it made, because you'd only need to know about 4 things, and you'd get them all. Here we go. Here's a little bit more for you. Oh, great. Here's a little bit of salal. Gaultheria shallon. And this is nice. This one still got a flower there. That's a salal flower. And these unripe berries. When the berries are ripe, they're a real deep purple color. So more salal. Salal has egg-shaped leaves. If you look very close, they're very finely toothed. And they're very leathery, or almost plasticky feeling. It's an evergreen species, so they have very thick leaves so that they aren't subject to herbivory. Other animals aren't going to be so inclined to eat them, and then they don't lose so much moisture during the dormant times of year. So broadleaf evergreen species tend to have very thick, very protected leaves. This is a pretty beautiful spot. Do you see any signs of disturbance? Why don't you look for a moment? I see a lot of downed wood. I'm not entirely sure what the source of it all would be, though. A lot of them... So, for example, this Douglas fir here rotted, developed some rot. We can see I'm not very good with my fungi, but here's the fruiting bodies of a fungi that's consuming this snag right now. I don't know if it's the one that killed it or if it's just one that came in after it died. And here's the top half of that tree. So this tree probably died, had some rot, became weakened, and then blew down in the wind. And the soil here is so remember it's so shallow, I think it's possible that there's also just slow growth and high mortality of these trees. And then when you see fungus on a tree like this, you don't know if that fungus is something that invaded the tree while it was still alive and contributed to that tree's death, or if it's the type of fungus that simply consumes dead material and just the tree died of other causes and then that fungus came in. And when I say you don't know, you know if you're a mycologist, you know if you study these things. I don't, so I'm just saying if you see a fungus growing on a tree and you don't know what kind it is and you don't know about that type of fungus, it could be something that killed the tree, or it could just be something that came in to consume the wood after the tree had died. Oh, there's a little tiny thing here. Let's see, this isn't a very good specimen, but this is, I'm pretty sure that is a licorice fern. Glycopodium, oh, now I can't remember. Glycoriza is I think the specific epithet. I have to look up the scientific name. I don't always remember the scientific names either. But licorice fern, you see it's growing out of the bark of this tree. Licorice fern is interesting. It's often an epiphyte, meaning that it grows on other trees. So we often see licorice fern growing on the bark of other trees, especially big leaf maples. Big leaf maples often have licorice fern growing on their bark. Look down here. This is kind of cool. This is a nurse log. So we've got a rotting log here, and I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, maybe 30 little seedlings growing in it. Do you know what kind of seedlings those are? Here's a clue. They happen to be from these cones. These are western hemlock seedlings. Western hemlock and western red cedar as well will sprout. The seedlings will germinate in dead wood. You don't see it quite as often in western red cedar, and partly that's just that western hemlock is a much more prolific reproducer, and the seedlings grow very well in shade. So here's another little one growing here too. Very few of these trees will actually make it to adulthood, but when you look around in forests around here, western hemlock reproduces really well in the shade, and it produces lots of seed. And I think when we talk to some of the other staff here and they talk about their management plans, they basically never plant western hemlock, because if there are any mature western hemlock around, plenty of seed will come in and the western hemlock will regenerate in an area on their own without the help of humans. All right. Thank you.